Welcome to Jon Ferrian Live. Here we are, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Pacific time, just like every single week. Hey guys, come on in and check it out. We have got an awesome episode for you tonight with Tanner Hamlin, friend of mine here in the locally here in the Pacific Northwest, fellow club member of the Snow Jammers, one of the many clubs I'm a member of. And so we have folks coming in. As you're coming in, do me a favor, let me know where you're watching from. We need to know. So Tia, you know the routine. Tia's from Santa Barbara. Every week she checks in. Appreciate you watching. Who else is out there watching? I got Bill Yeager watching. Bill is a snow jammer. He's here to support us and cheer us on. Appreciate you, Bill. Bill's part of search and rescue in the area, so really appreciate him watching tonight. Would love his take on things, and his comments throughout the show tonight would be fantastic. So we have the Woody's Racing Share and Win contest going on tonight. Just for showing up and watching the show and sharing it out, you will be eligible to win some fabulous prizes from Woody's Racing. Tonight we're going to give away some nitro lubricants, two-stroke oil, and some hand wipes, some hand cleaners. So appreciate everybody jumping in. Again, while you're watching and when you're starting to go in there, drop it in the comments of where you're watching from. We love to know where all of these shows are being broadcast out to and who's watching. It actually does make a difference, because if I know you're watching from the Midwest or from BC or from the West or wherever you're watching from, it helps me come up with great content for you in the future, helps me understand who I'm speaking to and what kind of topics to tackle. So I really appreciate you guys here. I even see Christina Markovitz, a.k.a. Tanner's girlfriend. She's watching. I love it. We've got Tom M. watching. We got Sabrina Reisner watching from Clayellum. A lot of shout-outs. We got Brian Thiebolt, one of our big winners today. I think Brian was the winner of the T-shirt, the Fly Racing T-shirt like this. He's the winner from the last episode. And we got a lot of cool things going on. So let me go ahead and pause the music here and just remind you guys one more time about a couple of things that we have going on. We just launched here a little while ago the Jon Ferrian Live, we call it the Live Large University, which is an avalanche education scholarship program that I've kicked off. We've got a great partnership with Erie, great partnership with Ride Rasmussen Style is included. We have a great partnership with Mad Ends from Mountain Skills. We have a great partnership with the Mountain Lab. We have Matt and Will out at the Mountain Lab, and then of course Brian Lundstedt from Tyler's Backcountry Awareness. Everybody's in, everybody's involved, and we're dialing in the final details. But what you can do right away is you can go on to the Jon Ferrian's website. I don't have it memorized, but I'll drop it in the comments later. I'll add it into the show. But you can go on there, buy some Live Large merchandise and cool things coming on. And the profits, all the profits that would come to me for that program are all going to go to Erie into a dedicated motorized account just for avalanche awareness and education. And I'm going to give you guys right now a quick sneak peek of a logo that I've got brewing. So this isn't done and finalized yet, but check this out. We've got a JFL, Jon Ferrian Live, with a red cross in the middle to symbolize a few things. We've got my initials, the names of the show, hashtag Live Large underneath. We got a red cross in here for safety. If you look close, the F is like the Facebook symbol. So we got a lot of things communicated right in one little cool little logo here. So keep an eye out for that on things like hats, maybe some of the shirt designs coming. We've got new designs coming. It's going to be pretty cool. So in 3, 2, 1, I am going to bring up Mr. Tanner. You ready for this, buddy? Here we go.
Here we go.
All right. How's it going, my friend?
Oh, not bad. Yourself?
Good. So, Tanner, you and I have known each other, I bet it's been a few years at least, right? That we've bumped into each other at club events, and I've met you through a lot of the local events. I know the Snow Jammers do a big fun run every year, and your girlfriend, Christina, has been involved in the club for many, many years and helps run that club's page, and you've been on the scene now for a few years as well, too. And just want to say thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and especially when I know somebody in person and personally like this, it's always meaningful for me. And anything you want to say right up front, just to be on the show, and then we'll go into a quick introduction.
I'll just say it for her since she's watching too. We actually met when we were kids here. I've been riding for 19 years. Been a member of the Snow Jammer since I was 6, and she was 2, I think she said, when she joined. So I mean, we've known each other our whole lives through the club. So
That's awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, as we know, Sled Fam, right? So the snowmobile family that we all are part of and are intrigued with, and you guys grew up in it, and have blossomed a relationship out of it, and you guys continue to be out there and pushing the limits, as we'll talk about a little bit tonight. But yeah, give us a little background on Tanner. Are you originally from Washington? Give us some more details specifically around how many years you've been snowmobiling and all that. So.
I've grown up in Tacoma for 19 years. Started snowmobiling when I was 5. Moved over to Montana after I graduated. Finished up my bachelor's degree over there. Moved to Spokane area for a couple years, Christina and I. Then I got opportunity to move into a field service truck for Komatsu. So now I'm the resident mechanic just outside of Leavenworth, Washington here.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. And you probably said it there, and maybe I just dazed off for a second there, but how many years you been sledding?
This is my 19th year.
Wow. And you're how old?
24.
24. So you were at 5 years old. You were probably ripping around the fields on a sled and going there. And,
Yep.
having that many years on the sleds, tells me, and I've ridden with you, so I can vouch for it, is you're a pretty experienced rider, right? Like, definitely
Yep.
can get out there and tear it up with the best of them. Inexperience definitely was not your issue on the mountain the day that you had your accident. Just a combination of things that came up and, led to this. So, before we dive more into the story of what exactly happened that day and kind of what went right, what went wrong, what I just want to remind everybody of is the reason we do these shows really is an example like Tanner here is, what, we have stories, like everybody has a story, right? And what can we learn from it and what can we do differently, right? And safety, education around the community, and frankly, a lot of times I find historically is an accident like Tanner's happens and the immediate people in the group maybe dealt with it, realized it, and maybe there were some lessons learned in a small group. But with my passion involved in the Northwest Avalanche Center here in the Pacific Northwest, being the state safety chair for the Washington State Snowmobile Association, this is our platform to be able to get messages like this out to help all of you. So everybody who's watching in the show here and everybody who's sharing this out, share it out with your friends. If they, on your personal page, you got people who ride, share it to your club pages, share it out to, the sled pages all over the industry, and let people know what's going on here so that we can continue to educate people and legitimately save some lives. Because I've personally had friends in a very similar situation as you, Tanner, literally pass away just a couple of years ago. Renee St. Ange, pro rider, guide up in British Columbia, very similar situation where he ended up underneath his sled. People couldn't get to him in time, and he didn't make it, unfortunately. And so I'm glad you're here talking to us. But let's go back to the day of the accident. Give us a quick timeline of, when this happened, maybe the day before leading up to it and the planning that went into the ride, or maybe even the week or two before. But let me just turn it over to you a little bit and just kind of start telling the story of, what led up to the day of the event, and then we'll dive into the day of the event.
Well, it started out originally we were supposed to be riding over in the same time frame, riding for the Snowjammers Fun Run.
Okay.
And fortunately that got canceled due to the whole COVID situation that's going on.
Yep.
And so we were really looking forward to riding over on the west side because that's where all the snow's been at in Washington. Nothing's been coming over to us. Everything, unfortunately, has been over there. So we figured, okay, we'll go for a weekend trip over on the west side somewhere. So Saturday, originally, we went to Lake Cochise. Neither of us had ever ridden there. Went and spent the whole day there. I think we rode like 60-some miles in an area that only had 20-some miles of groomed trail. And so the next day, we loaded up out of Christina's dad's house, lives in Puyallup, drove over to Mount St. Helens. Neither of us had ever ridden there. I've always wanted to ride there. I've always heard of the Lahars and how good of an area it really is to ride. So we were pretty excited,
Absolutely.
And so got up, drove over there, pulled in the parking lot. Just another day, Everyone started loading their sleds, gassing up, oiling up, gearing up. It's a weird parking lot if you've ever been to, I don't even remember what the snow park was, but it's just a weird circle.
Is it called Wakepish or Wakepish or something like that? I think it's
Yeah.
yeah, is the name of the snow park up there. And I'd only been to it one time myself, and frankly, it was only I think about 1 maybe 2 weeks in advance of your accident that I was up there. And when we were up at that exact same riding area, the Glenn, actually your girlfriend's dad, had joined us for our trip. And I think that's what probably triggered the idea to follow up and do a club ride or an event, with a bunch of people there. And I know Glenn had kind of, through email and some social media posts, had just let people know that you guys are going to be down there. And you guys end up with a pretty sizable group, which isn't traditional, but a lot of times these club events can get a little bit big, and especially for a ride like this. So why don't you touch on that for just a second of how many people showed up for the ride that day?
I think there was about 30 people or so, and we knew some people that were coming, and we didn't know other people were coming, and then there's people there that we had no clue or didn't even know who they were that were riding with us. At least me,
Yeah.
A lot of people I don't know because I'm not there anymore. So
Nice, nice. Okay, and so then in the morning, as you guys were unloading and getting ready to go, just kind of describe the scene in the snow park, describe kind of the preparation that went into you guys getting on the snow and heading up the trail.
it was a cluster in the snow park, because it's so tight and weirdly angled, so we're trying to unload sleds and get gear ready, and we're having to move trucks and trailers for other trucks and trailers coming in at the same time. So it was kind of a cluster trying to get everybody arranged and organized, and also to find out who all was with us at the time too.
Okay.
And so finally, once we got ready, everybody kind of piled up in a big group, and we started kind of going over a basic radio and beacon check at that point.
Okay, so that's good to hear. So you guys did do a beacon check and a quick radio check before you headed up?
A basic one, we're running this channel on the radios. If you have a Garmin, try to key up so other people have your Garmin name.
Yep.
If you have a beacon, make sure it's on. And that was kind of the gist of it at that point.
Okay, sounds good. And then anytime you're heading into mountain terrain, of course, a beacon check is critical too. And did you guys just like pair up and kind of off of a couple of you, or did somebody go through and check the whole group?
I think it was mostly just, everybody make sure you have your beacon on and get ready to go.
All right, sounds good. And then you guys are heading up the trail, and roughly what time of the day are you guys taking off from the snow park, right? What time of day is it when you're heading up?
I think it was around 10 by the time we were actually leaving the snow park.
Okay. And what was the weather looking like that day? What was the forecast?
Real sunny, a little bit of spotty clouds here and there, but it was supposed to be a real nice day all in all.
Okay. And then you guys are heading up the trail, and I'm sure as you're heading up the trail, you're starting to observe things like snow conditions too. So why don't you just continue on with the story, and I'll kind of quit with the questions and kind of let you just focus on the story for a little bit.
Oh, you're good. So yeah, we took up off of the trail, and we were told it was about 8 miles, I think, up to the first area that we were going to go up to, and it hadn't been groomed to look like in a little while. There was a few older sloughs off some real steep terrain down on the trail. Nothing extreme. There was maybe 3 or 4 inches of fresh snow on top of what was already there. And, I'd never ridden the area, so I never knew really what to expect, but I was excited. It was supposed to be a good day, and,
Yep.
Any snow is better than no snow.
Exactly.
So finally we got up to a big lookout point and kind of gave everybody a chance to group back up. With 30 different people, it takes a while to get all different skill levels down the trail. So we stopped and waited for everybody to catch up. And we were told that we were going to come up to an area to where anybody that really wants to drop off the hillside is more than welcome to. Everybody's ridden there before. Anybody who's not comfortable with getting off into a little more technical stuff, continue down on the trail. It'll go right around the valley and right around where we all were going to be. They could see us the entire time, supposedly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm familiar with the spot you're talking about. It's when you first come around a corner and you have a view of Mount St. Helens off in the distance, and then it starts dropping into some big bowls, but the trail kind of veers off to the right and just loops around back to the other side, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, so I know the spot exactly. And yeah, there's a big play area down in the bottom. There's bowls down there, multiple bowls. There's some drainages down there. And the terrain, you can cross country back up to the trail on the other side of this big giant trail loop that was going on. So I know for sure I have a visual of where we were at that day. So
yeah, and so when that was being discussed, that was all there was. Just if you want to drop off, you can. If you want to continue down the trail, you can. And so once everybody regrouped and was ready to go, We all just took off. As soon as we got to that point where we could split up, anybody that wanted to drop off dropped off.
Yeah.
No one knew who was going to drop off or how many people were dropping off.
Yeah. So
And so
I can smell it cooking here. The pot roast is in the oven now, so keep going.
yeah, so a bunch of us all headed over the edge, and we could watch the people riding around the little valley that we were in, and we were playing down there. It wasn't too good of conditions, but they weren't bad. I was still able to get around and explore a lot of different places in there, and we just kept cruising down through little ravines that were in there, around a bunch of trees, and all of a sudden we started hearing somebody on the radio actually say that a sled went over the embankment. And it was kind of a stop, what's going on? And we just could continue to hear somebody yelling, the sled went over the embankment, the sled's over the embankment.
So we're talking about somebody else, right? Like on the radio, you're hearing
somebody
chatter.
else, somebody else that we're with, but we don't know what's actually going on at this point.
Okay.
And so finally, we get them to calm down, and they said the sled went over the embankment, but the rider's still on the trail.
Okay.
And just give us a couple minutes, and we'll access it and try to get it out. And so we didn't want to worry because we knew there was other people there that could help with them, and we didn't want to be a hindrance and get in the way of all that too.
Okay.
So we waited a couple more minutes, and finally we heard that sled's back up on the trail. Everything's fine, and that was that.
Okay.
So the rest of us that were in the area kind of grouped back up. We had to cross over a little creek over to get to the other side of this area.
Yeah, when you say you regrouped with a part of your group there, give it a best estimate of how many people do you think were in that particular group, that small group that you were in at that moment when you regrouped?
At that time, probably 7 or 8 guys.
Okay.
3 or 4 of them, I don't even know who they were. They were with us, just didn't know who they were actually,
Okay.
So we took off, all crossed over the other side, no problems, and we could see a group up on the hillside, up on the road.
Okay.
We weren't sure if that was our group or if it was another group that was there. We thought they were still a couple, maybe a half mile farther back down the trail still. And we just kind of kept playing around these little mounds that were all through this little area. And a group off to my left went up one hillside, and I saw one nice little run that went between a stump and a tree on a decent hill. I would have hit it on my old little Power Special 600,
Yeah, wasn't a crazy big hill, is what you're trying to tell me. So.
Oh no, it was an easy one, and that unfortunately was the one that got me.
Okay. And so at the moment that you scoped out that hill, you're describing a few other people tearing off to another slope, and at the point that you decide to tackle that hill, describe the moment. Are you by yourself? Is there somebody sitting there right there with you? Like, what's going on in that exact moment right before you decide to tackle this hill that ultimately smacked you in the head?
Well, there's a few other people riding around me. I don't particularly know who was there at the time, but I do know there was one other guy that I have known, for quite a few years. He was right behind me, and he was kind of sticking with me the entire time we were down in this area. He would kind of go one area, and I would follow him, and I would go another area, and he would follow me. And so it wasn't an official buddy system, but we were right around each other the whole time.
Okay, kind of keeping an eye on each other, which is always good.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
So I decided to I watched the group on my left. They all went up over the hill, and I'm like, okay, I'll go up this side of the hill and just kind of meet them up at the top there.
Okay.
And so I had a stump up on the top of the hill and a tree just a little bit farther than that, but there was probably a 30-foot gap in between the two.
Okay.
So I decided I wanted to go up and snake my way through the two of them, just like any other hill you would do something like that on.
Yep.
Well, unfortunately, it was on the shaded side of the hill. My side was.
Okay.
And so I didn't assess what was going on there at the time, but I started to go up the hill in between the stump and the tree. And when I just passed the stump, my track started spinning. I've got a 175-inch track with 3-inch paddles, and There was no traction there whatsoever at that point.
So you hit like an ice layer in the snow. Was there like
Yep.
fresh snow on top of the ice layer, or was it just sheer ice when you got in there without any snow on it at all, or what was
There
it?
was about 3 or 4 inches of fresh on top of it, but it was at the
So
time it just felt like solid ice underneath of
yeah,
that.
so it was hard to identify, right? Like you just look at the hill visually, and it looked like all the hills around you, but the fact that it was a shaded slope and hadn't had an opportunity to kind of set up or get some good traction on it too. So you're up the
Exactly.
hill, so you're icy hill. How far from the base of the hill are you when you start spinning out and losing control?
Oh God, maybe 150, 200 feet at the max. It wasn't a big hill at all.
Okay, big enough, but not too big. So
Hmm.
so what happens? So you're heading up the hill, you lose traction. What happens next?
So the angle that I was going at was up. I was heading to the right.
Okay,
Well, my track started to wash out to the right, also pointing my front end to the left.
okay,
So I just went to turn out and head back down to the bottom of the hill. It happens to all of us. And as I started to turn out, I realized that I had no more forward momentum. I was just kind of stopped and rotating over the hill.
it's a
And at that
position.
point,
It's a position you never want to be in, sideways on the hill with no momentum, right? Like it's the worst
exactly.
position ever. So I can
And so,
imagine you started rolling down the hill, right? Is what happened, or what happened?
well, so at that point, I felt it start to tip over, and I realized it was going to go over. So I jumped off to try to get out of the way. And by the time I realized that I wasn't going to clear it, I just, hunkered down, ready for it to roll over the top of me. It would have been my seat and my spare gas can, just kind of roll over my back. And I was hoping it didn't hit too many trees below me.
Yeah. And so when you fell off the sled and started going down the hill, you said you were 150, 200 feet, up off the base of the hill. Were you at a point where you slid to the bottom of the hill and the sled landed on you, or were you up on the hill and the sled just rolled onto you and you guys were both up on the hill?
We were up towards the top of the hill at the very crest of
Huh.
my exit strategy.
And so you're up at the top of the hill, and like I'm trying to picture this. Like, was it a smooth hill? Was there like divot there or something like that you and the sled got hung up on, or like I'm trying
No,
to.
it was a smooth hill, and it just didn't have any momentum for it to continue to roll, I guess.
Wow. And so you just got hung up on the hill. You're under the sled. Are you face up or face down at the moment the sled lands on you?
At that point, I realized once it hit me, I realized it wasn't going anywhere, and I was face first in the snow.
Okay.
It was about on the side of my face, but I was chest first. And once I realized it wasn't moving, I then realized also I can't breathe.
Okay. And
And that was when panic really started to set in with me at that point.
yeah, like let's talk about that for a minute here, man. Because like I can honestly say I've been lucky enough to never been in that situation where like I feel like I'm in the moment, like panicking and losing breath and all that, right? Like it's got to be the scary, scary feeling. And
Oh yeah.
what's going through your head emotionally? What are what's going on? Is it just sheer panic, fight for your life? Is it like life flashing before your eyes? Like what's going on exactly at that moment?
Well, I'm panicking. I'm realizing I can't breathe and I can't move and I don't know what's going on at that point.
Okay.
And I'm trying to move around and I can't move my right arm. I don't know what was wrong with it, but my left arm was free, and so I'm trying to fight and wiggle. And at the same time, me and the sled could move an inch or two at a time, and
Okay.
an inch or two at a time. And so I started to realize, okay, well, maybe I can get it to want to slide more and get the sled just to continue to roll off of me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I can't breathe at this point either, and I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's on my back, it's pushing me, and I can't figure it out at the time. And at the same point, I hear on my radio, because I have a BCA radio, I hear somebody yell, "He's stuck under the sled." And so I was able to reach up and grab my mic and try to yell for help, but nobody heard me. Nobody had any clue that I even said help, because no sound actually came out when I did say it.
Wow. And so then you black out, right? Like how long? I
Well,
mean, how long do you have consciousness? What's going on in your mind until you lose consciousness?
I'm probably guessing it was about 30 seconds from the time I got stuck to the time I passed out. But after I try and yell and help, I realized I couldn't talk, and I really went into fight or flight mode. I mean, it was
Yeah.
freak out, try to get the sled off of me. and I was just kicking and trying to pull and get the sled off of me, and then that was that.
Lights out.
Yep.
And so that's the thing, people, right? So let's think about this for a minute. Is Tanner is here under his sled, and a sled like that is, you're a big guy. Like, how tall are you? How much you weigh? Like, you're a big dude, right?
I'm 6'1", on a good day, I'm 265.
Yeah. And so it's not like you don't have the physical strength to like move about anything you want to move in life, right? And
Exactly.
to have this feeling of helplessness, you're under your sled, you can't breathe, and then it's lights out, right? Now you're at the mercy of whatever happens. And thinking about the fact that you're in this group that is kind of watching out for you, but you're not 100% certain of it. Thank God you heard somebody say over the radio, he's under his sled and can't get out. And so anything else in that moment you want to share or reconcile on? And then I'm going to ask you to go back to the stories you heard afterwards of what you believe happened based on the stories that you heard until you were resuscitated. So anything in that moment first before we go into what you heard after the fact?
After I got stuck, I was being pulled in a weird direction. My helmet was pulling, and it did hurt too at the same time. And I'm trying to figure out why I can't breathe. How do I get unstuck? Is somebody going to be able to help me?
Yeah.
And will I make it? And I'm realizing that there was one guy below the hill, and I was really hoping at that point he could get up there and help me.
Yeah.
And then I blacked out before anything could happen at that point.
All right. And so let's just assume it's lights out for now. And then what I'm debating, what was your next memory versus what were you told happened after that? I'll let you decide which way you want to go with it. But you tell me. Do you want to talk about what was your next memory and continue on there and then backtrack to filling in the gaps? Yeah. What was your next memory?
The next thing I remember is kind of coming to, and because it was real sunny, so it was real bright out, and I'm having a hard time seeing, and I'm having a hard time breathing, and Christina's on my left side, and she's yelling and screaming, and I'm trying to figure out what's happening because I just woke up from a nap all of a sudden, and I can't breathe though from this nap that I just woke up from.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going on. There's people around me. People are talking. She's yelling. I can't see. And that really freaked me out at that point, too.
Yeah. What's your memory of about how many people were standing around you at the point that you regained consciousness?
I remember I had two people in front of me, Christina to my left, and then there were several guys behind me. And unbeknownst to me at the time, several of them are still holding my sled on the hill from preventing it from rolling down on us at this point.
Okay. And had you been, when you regained consciousness, were you drugged to the bottom of the hill, or were you still up on the hill at the point that you regained consciousness?
We remained at that point for a couple minutes until I could officially kind of walk and had my bearings and understood what was going on and had my strength back too.
Yeah, for sure. So that's your next memory. And so do you want to now fill in the gaps on what you were told happened after you were out cold? And, I know you've heard all the stories, and I know I've heard a lot of them, but I want them to come from you and what your words are on what happened. So.
Yeah, and so I don't know exactly who told who or who saw what at this point, but I know several guys. I will know the one guy that I was hoping for that would help me, he did rush to me, and he was the first one there.
Okay.
But unfortunately, he was trying to lift the sled vertically off of me from what I was told at the heaviest point of the sled, and he could not manage to lift it off of me by himself.
Okay.
And so several other guys came over. They were able to get enough pressure off and were able to slide me down out from underneath the sled. So at this point, I am not under the sled.
Okay. You're not connected in any way, shape, or form to the sled at that point?
Nothing on me at that point.
Okay.
And so from what I was told was several other people were still riding around the area. No one knew what actually had happened.
Okay.
There was still a group, probably half of the group that we were with, sitting on the trail and had a direct line of sight at me.
So they were watching something going on, but they didn't necessarily know how serious it was at the moment, right?
And from what I was told afterwards is a lot of them thought that somebody just got their sled, stuck on the hill, and went about their conversations and just kind of kept an eye on what was going on, but didn't know actually.
Yep.
And so they were able to get me out, and they were trying to cut my helmet strap off.
Okay.
And I don't have, at the time, I was just, it was $100 fly helmet that had the basic
Yeah.
helmet strap, the same
Tradition.
thing I've always used.
Yeah. Traditional D-ring helmet system is, probably 90% of the helmets in the market all have that same system. So,
Exactly.
yep.
And so they tried at that point to cut my helmet off of me.
Is
And the
there a
whole time,
is there a
also,
reason they couldn't release the D-ring? Was there something going on that were you swelling or
I don't
something
know
like
if they
that or
never
not?
tried that or not. I mean, all I
Okay.
know is that they tried to, were just trying to cut it off.
Okay.
And the whole time, though, I'm still face first in the snow from when I crashed. They just pulled me straight down the hill.
Okay.
And I guess after several knives and several attempts, they could not cut through the strap. So they got on the radio and they told whoever was on the other line, we need a sharp knife.
And just to be clear, you're still unconscious at this point, right?
Unconscious, I have no clue what's going on. And
Likely not breathing,
yep,
is what I heard. Yep.
yep. And so finally, Christina's dad, Glenn, he heard on the radio that they need a sharp knife. So he went above me on to the top of the hill, not knowing where they needed a knife at.
Okay.
So he knew at that point, though, that there was a group of people below me, or below him, sorry, on the hill. And he rode down, I think he said about 60 feet below where I was at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He got off his sled and turned up and realized that that's Tanner on the hill. He's face first. He's not moving. And he said panic really started to set in for him that, oh, my God, he's not moving. So he ran up the hill. And he said when he first got to me, he rolled me over, and the helmet was still on, and my helmet was full of snow inside of my visor and everything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And come to find out, though, when I first got stuck, there was no snow on my helmet. I was completely clear,
From getting
but when
drugged
they
down the
drugged me
hill.
down, it filled it full of snow.
Wow. Okay.
So he cleared all the snow out of my helmet, and he took a knife. He said he got it from the pawn shop, the famous pawn shop in Las Vegas. And he said
That's awesome.
one slice, and it cut right through the strap, and it was cut at that point.
Okay.
And so they pulled it off, and this part here still it freaks me out. He said I looked like Byron Beauregard. I was so blue.
Oh, wow.
He said my eyes started rolling back in my head, and at that point I actually started having a seizure at that point from lack of oxygen.
Wow.
And from what I was told by another person that was there also, was I did have a pulse, but they were trying to figure out what to do. Why wasn't I okay? Why wasn't I breathing? And so at that point, they realized that they needed to open up my vest. I wear a BCA pack with a vest on it.
Yeah.
So they opened that up, and I was in a weird position to where my head was kind of rolling back over my pack because it was pushing my body forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they decided to take my pack off and began doing CPR at that point, and they started doing it. And Glenn said he gave me a breath of air, and it blew right out my nose, right in his face.
Oh, wow.
So he realized he forgot one of the steps, and had to
Tip.
close my nose actually.
Well, that and tip your head back probably, right, to allow it to go down, I'm sure, is part of it, or
Yeah.
no? Yeah.
And so I guess him and another guy performed compressions and breaths off and on, not very long for what I understand it as.
Yeah.
And I guess I kind of started coming to, but I don't remember that. And so I guess there was a few minutes from when I was breathing to when I do remember what was going on at that point.
Whew. I almost lost my breath hearing the story, buddy. Like, let me just tell you, God bless you. I love you for being here, man. Like, I'm so glad
Yeah.
you made it through that. And I can tell the story still stresses you out, right? Like,
Oh
and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
as it
I'm shaking here.
as it should, right? Like having that vivid memory and all those things going on, and there. And I'll repeat it, right? Is like a lot of people would take a story like this and to some degree maybe be embarrassed or like, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to talk about this again. And I just give you giant kudos, like other people who've come on this show before, to be able to be willing to share this very important story and to be vulnerable enough to be able to know you want to help other people out, right? And what's going on. And so
Well, and I look at it also too is those guys that were there, no matter what, they had to live with the outcome that happened that day.
Exactly.
And someday down the road, I'm going to have to live with another outcome, probably in their position helping somebody else.
Yeah.
And I want to try to make sure that other people
Yeah.
can live with the outcome that happens. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's not pretty, unfortunately.
Yeah. And before the show's over here, we're going to go back through a pretty good list of, what went right, what went wrong, and what we do differently. But we're going to cover that at the end. What I want you to talk about right now is after you came to what happened next. I mean, I know I've heard stories that part of the crew went with you down to the hospital, got you to the ER. Just tell us the rest of the story for that afternoon and what happened, and then we'll come back to the what went right, what went wrong.
So after I kind of came to, as justified, I kind of broke down at that point. I'm still
Yeah.
sitting on the hill. This is maybe a minute or two after I remember coming conscious. There's guys still above me holding the sled up, and I had a breakdown at that point. I told Christina, I'm done. I'm selling the sled. I'm getting out of the sport. And
By the way, you're a liar. I've seen you ride since then. I know. I'm just giving you crap.
yeah, I think I've done 3 or 4 rides since then. So
Yeah. It's a bug that's hard to get over, and I think that's the thing that I want to. A lot of people have that reaction, and the thing I'll remind people of is that what, with some additional thought, some additional preparation, some additional planning, potentially your situation could have been avoided. And I think that's some of the lessons learned we're going to cover at the end. That's going to make you feel more comfortable getting back out on the snow again, as you already have. But I guarantee you, your rides have been a little different ever since then, right? And we'll get to that.
definitely.
Yeah. So finish out the rest of your day. What happened that day?
So finally, I was able to. They got some little bit of food and a little bit of water in me, and I was able to walk down to the next closest sled. So I'm sitting in the sun, out of the snow, kind of warming up, catch my breath, and I'm still having a hard time breathing at this point too.
Okay.
And the guys above, they got the sled down and kind of got it to the same little area we were at, and everybody, they wanted to go, they wanted to go, they wanted to go. And not everybody, but some people, they wanted to go. They wanted to get out of the spot, continue on. And I needed a couple more minutes to catch my breath and figure out what really happened and what was going on.
Yeah.
And I made it clear to anybody, if they truly wanted to go continue riding. I just need a little bit of time here. I have to catch my breath. I have to catch my bearings. A lot just happened.
Exactly.
And so,
what I'm hearing right now is that even at this point, when people have witnessed what's going on, I don't, I'll just say it from my own point of view, is I don't think people still understood how serious this was, right?
A lot of people didn't understand what was going on, didn't understand the seriousness, and I think part of it too was they wanted to get with the rest of the group.
Yeah.
Which was just maybe 100 yards, a little bit down the hill on the road, but I just needed time to catch up and catch my breath at that point.
Yep. Nope, I hear you. And so what was your plan? Then as soon as the rest of the group kind of got back together, I remember hearing that you guys headed off the mountain pretty quick after that, right? Or what happened?
Yeah, so once I got my breath and my bearings, it was kind of discussed of, okay, what are we going to do? Do you want to ride your sled to the rest of the group and meet up with them and we'll regroup? Do you want somebody else to ride it out and you ride with somebody? And I couldn't do that. I couldn't have somebody else ride me out at that point, knowing that I can walk, I could talk, I could breathe. And so I decided to where I would put all my gear on and I would ride the sled down to the group. Mm-hmm. And so a couple guys went in front of me to make sure that it was a clear path, which there was nothing there to begin with, but okay. And everybody else stayed behind me. And so I rode down over a couple little mountains and down onto the road and with the rest of the group and shut the sled off. And I lost it again at that point. I had a complete breakdown right there on the trail in front of 30 different people.
Yeah.
And I never thought at that point that I would have been that close to not getting back on the trail.
Nope, I hear you.
And so the discussions at that point were, okay, how are we going to get you off? Do we want to go a little bit further up? There was supposedly a building that was in the sunlight that we could ride to. It was just right up the trail. Yep, and I could sit there.
I know the spot. I know the spot. You're probably maybe a quarter mile from that building just around the corner up there. So.
And so a lot of people thought that would be a good idea. And I thought about it at a point too, but after having a sled land on my neck, I thought, I may be fine now, but something may not be fine later, and I probably should go get checked out.
Good call. Good call. I'm just gonna tell you right now, man, that was the right decision. So
And so then the discussion again was, okay, how am I going to get off? Because I think we were like 8 or 9 miles up a pretty bumpy trail.
yep.
And everyone said that somebody else can ride or tow your sled out and you can ride with somebody else. And in my head, when your sled breaks down, that is a rough and horrible ride for anybody.
Yeah.
And if something was messed up in my neck, I didn't want to be at the mercy of somebody else going down the trail at their speed, at their abilities to potentially hurt me, hurt them, or something else happen,
Yeah.
And so I decided that the safest way would be for me to ride down, people, I led on the way out and everybody was behind me, but I set the speed for myself and anybody else. If somebody wanted to go faster, they could, but I was only going to go as fast and as rough as I felt was fine at that point.
Yep. And so you made it back to the trucks into the snow park, right?
Yep. So we got back to the trucks, and I started taking my gear off before anybody got the sleds loaded, and we backed my truck out, and a couple other people loaded my sled and Christina's sled onto the sled deck.
Good idea.
And so then it was, okay, you're not driving. And I'm like, okay.
Good call. Another good call. Yep.
And thankfully, Christina, she, driven in Idaho and driven here in Leavenworth in the snow. So she had an understanding of, how to drive a truck in the snow. And that's a topic in itself, too.
Yep.
And so after that, thank you guys for, coming down to help me. You guys all of you didn't have to come down. And so we took off from Mount St. Helens and headed to Yakima, headed to the hospital, the closest one on our way home.
That still was a ways away, because based on where you're at, you probably still had at least an hour or 2 hour drive to get to any of the closest hospitals, right?
I think it was a 2 hour drive to get to the hospital.
Yeah. Yep. And so as you're in the vehicle just going for a ride, other than the mental stress of what you just went through, how were you feeling physically through that whole process during the drive?
My neck was pretty tight. I couldn't move my head all the way, and my shoulders were kind of starting to hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
I could breathe fine at that point.
That's
nothing, no problems there. But it was just kind of stiff. It was like you got hit with a snowmobile.
Yeah, exactly. And so you obviously got checked out by the doctors. What did the doctors tell you, quote unquote, that was wrong with you? Did they just, what was their assessment of what happened? Like, why did you black out? Were you compressed out of breath? Were you pinching off an artery because your head was twisted around? Like, did they give you any indication of what might have caused your blackout? Or
there's what they're saying, it was from straining and fighting so hard. Because
Okay.
I mean, after we got down, I remember people saying it looks like you got beat up. I was black and blue all the way across my face.
I remember the
Blood
pictures.
vessels in my eyes were popped. I mean, I looked like I went through the ringer after it.
Yeah, like fighting with Mike Tyson, right?
Exactly.
And then when they checked you out and you were done, I mean, was it a clean bill of health? You didn't have to go back for a follow-up, or was there a follow-up appointment after you got released from the first time?
No, I went through, they did a CAT scan, they did blood work, everything
Okay.
came back fine. The only thing the doctor said was, we don't know whether or not you hit your head or not,
Yeah.
and so we're putting you on concussion protocol.
Okay.
Well, my head was never in any sort of impact.
Yeah.
Thankfully, at least, I was never hit. There was no damage on my helmet other than a few scratches, but
Yeah.
no impact marks.
Yep. Okay. So is there any other part of the story or the aftermath that that we haven't talked about yet that you want to make sure we dive into before we go kind of as a recap of the event?
At that point, probably not. I mean, we've covered a
Yeah.
lot of it.
Yeah. Okay. So right before the show, we sat here and we chatted a little bit, and we made a quick list of, quote unquote, what went right, what went wrong, and what will you do differently, right? And I think that's the important part here. And before we even get into that, I think, I can only imagine there's at least one, if not at least a few people that you want to thank for getting you through that moment and through that day. Is there anybody you want to call out by name and thank them for them? And I can imagine somebody named Glenn would be a key person you'd want to make a shout out to. And he's dropping comments. He goes, he's got a comment here. Says, "I'm glad you hung in there, Tanner, and made it off the mountain that day. It was scary to see how blue you were when I turned you over." And so, yes, Glenn, I'll just say it, and then you can go back and do your thank you. But thank you, Glenn, for your part in, getting Tanner back breathing again and off the mountain that day, and stepping in that emergency. So thank you, Glenn. But go ahead, Tanner.
Yeah, I'd really like to thank Glenn. He's done a lot for me, and that what he did is probably the biggest thing anybody can do for somebody. Tom M., Jeff Heward, Bill Jubert, and unfortunately, there are guys there that I don't know who they were. I don't know who else was there.
Yep.
And there were other guys actually on the mountain that watched what happened. Come to find out later on, we had no clue. They were not with us, and they said that it changed the way they're going to ride too.
Yeah.
Guys that we have no clue who they are.
Yep.
They were there and watched it. And
yeah. Well, let's talk about it, right? I mean, let's dive into first, what went wrong, right? And I think we could argue that there was a lot of things that went wrong, right?
Yep.
Is what went wrong, but because I think we made a couple of different situations. What went right, what went wrong, and actually I think the first one was what went right that day. So there's some things that got you off the mountain and what went right. And so why don't you go through them from memory, and then I'll remind you of any of them that you maybe missed. So.
One of the things that went right was Glenn had a sharp knife that was able to cut through my helmet strap in one pull, supposedly. Yep. And that was the biggest thing. Is come to find out there were other knives involved that they couldn't cut through it, and they tried sawing through my strap, and afterwards there were a few marks on my neck from when they're trying to saw through it and couldn't get through it.
Yeah, no, that's a dangerous situation right there.
It is.
And then thank God somebody saw you right away, right? Is one of the things that went right.
Yep.
And so
I don't even know who that was. I don't know who said it on the radio, but guys at least were able to get to me fast enough at that point.
Yep. And then radio communication. So we're going to put this in the category of what went right and what went wrong. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's talk about what went right with radio communication.
Somebody was able to call on the radio and say that we need a sharp knife. Yep. And Glenn, he's said that to me several times, that that's all he knew was that they needed a sharp knife. He didn't know if they needed to cut a rope or if someone's zipper got messed up or what. And so he didn't have any sense of urgency knowing what was going on.
Yep, exactly. So the radio communication, the fact that radios existed in the group and people were riding with radios was a blessing that at least got the person who came over to support you there. We'll put that also in the category of what went wrong, is that I think a very clear, concise communication on what was going on, what was needed, calling out for, somebody who can help with CPR, any of that kind of stuff. Yeah. There's a lot that could have been done differently on the radio communication piece to get you help faster, right? Everything worked out, but had it been just a few more minutes, it maybe wouldn't have, right? And so
it could have been a different story, yeah.
Yep, every minute counts there. And then the fact that, CPR, right? Like, that's a big one. Talk about that for a minute. Is Glenn trained in CPR? Has he been certified before? The fact that some of your group knew CPR, even the basics of it?
I don't know if Glenn actually has CPR training or not. I mean, he's an IT guy. Me, I'm on an active mine sites and quarry sites, so I have active first aid and CPR training. I don't know if he actually had anything, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And so Tom M. was in your group, and I'm seeing him write some comments here that he was probably on the scene at the point that your helmet was removed. Mm-hmm. And I know Tom is trained search and rescue, so I can almost certainly tell you that Tom is trained in CPR, and whether he was doing it or Glenn was doing it, maybe they were just coaching each other. But bottom line is
it was a combination between the two of them.
Yeah, I would agree. And then I don't know if you caught my episode just from a couple of weeks ago here, but Rick from the Altitude Sickness, they're the firefighter, first responder folks from, or the paramedics from Milwaukee area. He's got a comment here. He goes, stories like this are exactly why Jason and I started Altitude Sickness. Everything from knowing how to remove the helmet to doing proper CPR, having the right equipment, and having some basic first aid can make the victim rescue instead of a body rescue recovery. I'm so happy you're doing great. So, the professionals are hearing your story and kind of confirming that things went right. Glenn saying the last time I took CPR class was about 30 years ago. So you're lucky. I'm just going to tell you, you're lucky you're alive, buddy. Yeah. But I just started using common sense, so that's awesome. And a lot of folks helped, and Tom M's got a little smiley face there too. I'm sure he chipped in and helped out a lot too. So, but let's talk. Go ahead.
Even with me being CPR and first aid trained for my job, just because you can do it on a dummy doesn't always mean, people are prepared for real life. And
amen to that.
It is a whole different story when there's somebody in front of you that and
oh yeah, no, it's crazy. And so let's talk about the things that went wrong. And I think we had a pretty big laundry list of those things too. So I'll let you go ahead and tee it up, and then I'll support you along the way where you need to. So.
Well, to start out with, we had a basic radio and avalanche beacon talk in the morning. It was not clear as to who had radios and who had beacons. It was not clear what was on and what was working.
Yeah. And then just the riding meeting in the morning, right? Could have been a little bit more. And I'll just call it out. It's like it's hard with that large of a group to do an effective meeting. It is. Like I've done groups.
And we were stopped in the middle of the road. There was trucks coming in, other snowmobilers heading out, and we were in the middle of the road. And so it was kind of, okay, here it is. Okay. Now let's go.
Yeah. And so the other thing is, riding in that large of a group, right? Like it's as much as we all want to hang out together, sometimes it's not the safest environment to be in is in a large group like that. And I'm not trying to say you shouldn't or shouldn't have, because I do the same thing, right? Like I go out on these group rides, and a lot of times they're basic beginner family rides when we get that big of a group. But at any point we're doing like an intermediate ride or something like that, we try as best we can to keep it, under 10 people or less for the most part. So group size plays a big dynamic in group safety, rider safety. And when you get into a larger group, then that's when it's critical to assign a buddy system. You know what? Yeah. Me and you, Tanner, are going to be buddies today. You keep an eye on me. I'm going to keep an eye on you. No matter what happens, we don't separate, right? Like that's the kind of conversations you have with people at the beginning of the day, and you make sure everybody's got a buddy at that point. So, What about snow conditions, avalanche conditions? Did you guys scope all that out ahead of time? Did you kind of have an idea of what you were getting into that day?
Right now, I don't remember what the avalanche conditions were. I know it was talked about through several people, and I know Christina and I had talked about it. I don't remember what they were at this point, but that was really all we had talked about. It wasn't. We didn't know how much snow was up there. We didn't know what the snow conditions were before that, and so everything that we had been riding before, it was fairly soft and fairly decent snow. It wasn't thick, but it was a fairly decent snow and not a lot of ice under it either.
Yep. Nope, exactly.
And then I went to a different area and things changed.
Yep. And so this was something that didn't necessarily come out in the story that you shared tonight, but I know we talked about it in advance, and it's a really critical one in this situation, is your Skidoo comes from the factory with a tether on it. Tell us about your tether that day.
It was clipped onto my handlebars, so that way it wouldn't get ripped off. And before this, I've ridden older Polarises and older Cats, early 2000s and 90s. Nothing ever had a tether.
Yeah.
A lot of guys I know, they ride with them, they swear by them. I never grew up with the culture of wearing them.
Yep.
And so it wasn't a priority to me at the time to have it on.
Yeah. And so when the sled came rolling down on top of you, I didn't hear whether the sled died, whether it was because it hit the kill switch, whether it, what happened to the sled? Was it still running on top of you? Was it not running on top of you? Do you know?
When I lost all momentum and I realized it was going over, the only thing that went through my head was get away from the sled because it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And so I just jumped off and tried to brace myself, and I don't know how the sled shut off, to be honest with you. I don't know if I may have hit the kill switch at the time, if it rolled over and hit the kill switch.
Maybe one of the people who came up to rescue you hit the kill switch afterwards. Like it's hard to say exactly what happened, right?
No, because when the sled landed over on me, the track was actually what was on my neck.
Oh shit, dude!
The rubber track with 3-inch paddles was what was pinning me on the ground on my neck.
Forgive my language, but you almost got decapitated, buddy. Like, had that sled been running and the throttle gotten pinned in the snow, as it happens all the time, the track coming down in your neck would have almost instantly killed you. Like, dude, yeah, that's the first time I've heard that, and so you can tell by my reaction, I'm just like, oh my god, like, so.
Yeah, and so it was the track that was on my neck, and the weird angle, it pulled my helmet back, and the strap is what caused the lack of airflow,
Wow, that's crazy. And so thank God the track wasn't spinning, but had you been wearing a tether, you could have ensured that you would have not been in that situation. You got lucky. Exactly. You got lucky this time.
And on a side note too, it's on me now every time I step on the sled.
God bless you, man. That's the right thing to do. And then, proper equipment like knives, other tools that were there. We talked about the radio already, and the communication. Had anybody said very quickly, urgently that there's an emergency here, we need medical help, we need CPR, whatever's going on. But whoever was on the radio early on definitely should have been more clear and concise to the rest of the group that there was an emergency and it was all hands on deck. So,
Yeah.
anything you want to add there?
Yeah, because the last thing I heard was, he's stuck under a sled, and I never heard anything else after that. I don't know if anybody truly called out afterwards to say that he is stuck under a sled. There is a sled stuck.
Yeah.
We need a couple extra people to help. I don't know what was actually said after that. And for what I've been told, there really wasn't a whole lot of emergency communication going on.
Yeah. So Chris is here in the comments, and I think Chris probably, and I'm just going by what I'm reading here, so I hope I'm interpreting this the right way, but Chris says, I was there and was the one on the radio calling out the play-by-play as I could. I didn't want to take my eyes off Tanner until someone got to him. CPR training and radio communication will be number one on my list for 2021. I will be looking into group classes for the club, and we will be using experience as a catalyst for change and improvements while riding in the future. Glad you're still with us, Tanner. So that answers a lot of questions for us right there. So thank you, Chris, for your comments. And Chris, as you guys know, has stepped up and he's become. He was voted in this year as the club president for next year. So that's awesome. Yep, for the Snow Jammer. So great news there. Tom says Tanner was lucky. Jumped on me here. It says the kill switch got pushed somehow during the rollover. And somebody else here says crazy. Not a member, but I heard about it through a friend and was going to end up go, but ended up staying closer to home last minute. Glad it all worked out okay. It's kind of a long post here, so there's some things we can go back to later. But you've already mentioned some of them, but let's do just a real quick list of kind of what have you learned and what are you going to do differently. And you've already hit on, you're going to wear a tether, right? Mm-hmm. What else? What else? Anything else?
One more thing is when I'm not riding conditions that require ice scratchers, I'm going to start putting my ice scratchers up. That's one thing I haven't even said yet is when the sled rolled over, supposedly the ice scratcher was right next to my neck. Down, and it could have impaled my neck.
Yeah, that's a really rare, unique situation, so I can understand your concern around that, but just the whole situation was really unique. I mean, the fact that you were up on a hill and the sled didn't just roll past you and over top of you was really strange, too. Most of the time, I mean, I've had sleds roll down over top of me as well, too, before, but, I've never had them stop on me up on the hill especially, so... Cool. What else, lessons learned? What else are you going to do differently going forward? I mean, how about communication? What are you going to do differently, whether it be morning meetings versus radio communication or both?
Radio communication meetings, does need to be clear is, what channel we are on, make sure that people can use them, make sure people have the radios.
Yep.
The buddy system.
That's a big one.
Thankfully, there was a guy behind me. He didn't have to be there at the time. It was not agreed upon that he would be there for me. And so, thankfully he was with me.
Yep, absolutely.
Another thing is, knives and stuff. I knew after the fact I had 2 knives on me. Where they were, I have no clue at that point.
Yep.
One was in my tunnel bag, and the knife would not come out. The second one was in my pack. Neither of them were an easy, accessible point to where if I needed to use them, if somebody else in the same situation.
Yep, exactly. Cool. Well, buddy, I think we've covered everything that we wanted to cover tonight, and so I'm going to give you one last moment to just kind of think through any other messages you want to share with the community here, anything else you want somebody to walk away and remember, any final thank yous you have, anything like that. I'll turn it over to you for a minute.
One thing, the next week I bought a helmet, and I made sure I bought a quick disconnect with it. Would that have helped in the situation? I don't know. Possibly I could have gotten the helmet off, and I could have slid out.
Yep, possibly, yep.
Make sure you understand your equipment. After the accident, I made sure I did research on knives and emergency things to cut straps with. And I bought a pair of emergency scissors that have a strap cutter. Could not cut through a helmet strap.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so thankfully I have a helmet now I can practice on, but
nice.
people got to make sure they understand how to use their equipment, how to use their radios, their GPSs, their beacons. A lot of guys have all this stuff and they don't know how to use it, but no one thinks about the normal things of the pocket knives or all the other things that we carry too.
Yep, nope, absolutely. And training is key, right? And so there's different types of training out there. I mean, there's the avalanche awareness training that we preach about all the time, just backcountry preparedness, recovering somebody if they were buried in the snow. But then the other things are like CPR certification. Like just through my church as an usher in church, I get certified every 2 years as a CPR. And then I took the person who had been doing the training at our church and brought them into a setting where we did where people could sign up for training through our snowmobile club. And so it's been probably a year or two now since we've done a snowmobile club training, but offering CPR training, if the snow jammers want to put on a CPR training, if you don't have somebody that you can contact, I can get you in touch with somebody who's certified to teach CPR and first aid. And then for people who are really serious backcountry enthusiasts and are out there finding and leading a lot of people, I haven't done it yet. It's something that I would love to do someday. Is a wilderness first responder class is a big one too. And that one is the one that would have helped your situation the most, is that wilderness first responder, is how to deal with that emergency, how to have the right stuff in your first aid kit. And I can't say enough about the situation here where, the first aid kit that we talked about just a week or two ago, the altitude sickness one, a lot of the tools that would have been needed to support you would have been in a first aid kit right there in that kit. And so those guys, you can go back a couple episodes and look them up and, order one of their kits if somebody's ever so inclined after watching the show. And just want to make sure that everybody understands that the way we support and help the rest of the community is by sharing the show out, getting the message out. Don't let Tanner's story here go to waste, guys, and get this out across the country, because frankly, this happened in a Western scenario, but something very similar could happen anywhere that people are snowmobiling. It could happen up in Canada, Eastern Canada, the East Coast, the Midwest, anywhere you're on a snowmobile. You could be in an emergency like this where someone is pinned, has been injured or something, and you need to figure out how to respond. So this is one of those episodes that I really encourage everybody to share out. And of course, as you share, you're entered in to win prizes. Not that that's the reason we share, but it's a nice reminder to get everybody out there and do it. So Tanner, really appreciate you coming on tonight, and God bless you, buddy. Remind everybody to live large and have a great night. So any final words?
Thank you for having me on and being able to share this for, hopefully somebody else can be saved someday.
Absolutely. Thank you all for watching. Just hanging tight.